Hi, I'm Steve Cohen, and welcome to this week's Open to the Public. First stop, we're going to head up to designer Michael Wolk. Michael's a very talented person in town, does some wonderful things with furniture. We'll look at some of his designs, find out how he came to South Florida, a real romantic story in there also on how he proposed to his wife. Second stop, we're at the Wolfsonian, this wonderful institution here of education. We're going to have the opportunity to talk with Micky Wolfson, the founder. We'll find out why he started the Wolfsonian. We'll talk a little bit about the family growing up here in South Florida. And if you don't know, the Wolfson campus of Miami-Dade Junior College was named after his family. The Wolfsonian, of course, is named after the Wolfson family. Such an important and integral part of South Florida and the history down here. We'll get to talk with Micky Wolfson. All of that on this week's Open to the Public.
Welcome to the beautiful Young's Mandarin Garden Chinese restaurant. Come and try their soft shell crab, chicken in Sambay sauce, sizzling steak in black pepper sauce, emperor shrimp, seafood in a basket, and much more. Young's Pizza's the best in Szechuan and Cantonese food at reasonable prices. Call 672-1144 for afternoon or evening delivery 7 days a week. Young's, 954 41st Street, Miami Beach.
You're injured in an accident. You see a doctor. You're out of work. Then what? You probably need some sound legal advice. At Cohen & Cohen, we've been helping accident victims since 1970. If you've been injured in any type of accident, what are you waiting for? Pick up the phone and call Cohen & Cohen now for answers regarding your legal rights. Call Cohen & Cohen now at 1-800-33-COHEN. That's 1-800-33-COHEN.
We're in the home of designer Michael Wolk, who's done a lot of work around town. You describe your creative process as seeking a dialogue with your work. Are you sitting here talking to your work, Michael, or when you finish your work, it kind of talks back to you?
Both of those things happen, hopefully.
Explain that. Go a little further in that.
Well, it's the idea of your work. I think when you're in school and you're beginning the process of becoming a designer, you tend to think that there's a book somewhere, or that one of your teachers or one of the existing designers has answers. And you think of it as a process of, if you do the right thing and you make the right choices, and you put the right lines down and choose the right colors, that's the right answer. What you realize as you grow and evolve as a designer is that the answer really is inside of you, and hopefully when you express it in the work, whether it's a drawing or the actual production of some of the pieces, it says that back to you, and you know that that's the answer. And
now, you wanted to be a designer at a very young age, didn't you? What, I believe at 11 you won a scholarship to go weekends to Pratt Institute or something like that?
And it was actually earlier than that when I was drawing and was class artist from kindergarten right on through to college. And just my work was always put up at the front of the class, and I knew that was my sort of currency to get favors and love and attention from my parents and teachers and all. So
now I look through your house, and your son Hunter, who's not even 7 yet, is following in his dad's footsteps. Does that frighten you, or you're encouraged?
No, that's very, very exciting, and it's kind of reinvigorating to see how it happens at a very, very early age.
How do you wind up here in South Florida?
I came down here as a product designer, and I built a showroom on 40th Street, which was the old design district, which is coming back again, hopefully. And I stayed. It was just too exciting of a period. It was when all of the Latin American countries were getting cash into Miami, and out of those countries, and the high-rises were going up, and it was just boom time.
Wait a minute, let's talk a little bit about design. Okay, we'll actually talk a little bit about design today.
Yeah.
Your furniture. It's magnificent. I mean, I look at some of the works that you have down there. It reminds me of walking into the lobby of like the Royal Palm Hotel or some classics from the 50s. How do you come about designing furniture and the classic lines that you have? I mean, talk a little bit about what you have here.
What we have here. Well, some of the stuff that you're referring to is from a manufacturer called Design America. And that was very much of an idea that America, which at one point in the 30s and 40s started to come into its own as a design resource and not just be copying European designers. This man, John Young, decided to reinvigorate that whole era. And so that was the theme of where the source of inspiration, where the designs came from, which had to do with modernism and streamlining and, you know, kind of movement and sensuality in the actual forms that we sat on and wrote on. And
I mean, like myself, you're early mid-40s. Okay, when you started in design.
Well, actually, I just past January went over the midpoint.
Okay. Well, I'm still not there. Okay, Michael's much older than I am, actually. When you first started in design, everything was hand-drawn.
Right.
Now computers. How does that change your business?
It's just fantastic what it's done. I'll show you some sketches that I have that I've actually been able to take the hand drawing, the little kind of scribbles that I make to myself, mental notes for ideas, and have processed it through the computer, which puts a kind of a screen over it. And it enables you to make changes and just look at colors instantly, where before the process became, if you said, well, what are the options here? Let's see it in another color. Well, then you had to draw it again and do it in another color. Now you can actually, you know, in a matter of seconds, choose 15 other colors and one after another see how those look. You can blow it up in size. You can twist it around. You can manipulate the thing two-dimensionally, whereas prior to computers, all that had to be done mechanically by hand. So the options just get to you much faster.
Let's talk about some of your work around town. I mean, we hear designer, and you people at home like myself immediately think interior designer. It's much more than that. I mean, Mercury Restaurant, the health food store in South Beach, the Dockmaster over at the Marina.
Right.
Talk a little bit about those works.
Well, the latest one was Mercury, which was the old Max's. And I actually got that job because I do graphic work also. I had called, when I heard the owner had sold the business, I called up to see if the new owner might want a name change and might need new menus and graphic design work. And it turned out he had that already, and he wanted, and he had heard I do interiors, so we got the interior job that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's fun, isn't it? I mean, it's much more but than doing that. I mean, you also do menus, you do all types of different graphic things.
Right.
Some of the interesting menus. I know Dennis Maxey do a lot of work for.
Right,
correct?
I did Astor Place for him. We're working right now in his new place up in Fort Lauderdale, Astor, I'm sorry, Max's Beach Grill, or Beach Place, he's calling it. We did Prezzo and Maxaluna and all his others. We had done work on Joe's when they started their takeaway. That was a fun project.
Now, your wife is a very talented attorney in town. This is a romantic story. Tell us how you proposed to her.
I proposed to her in a helicopter. I wasn't flying it, thank God.
Yeah, luckily, right?
She lived in a building on Venetian Causeway, and right across was a helicopter. And I rented a helicopter. It was the week of Just Say No to Drugs. And I had painted these big 18-inch letters that said, just say yes.
And of course, your wife is attorney Henry Spiegel, who's a terrific communications attorney in town. And what did she say? Yes, of course.
Well,
right?
It took her a while because the sound, we flew up to the 14th floor and just hovered right maybe 20 feet away from the balcony, and I called her on a portable phone and I said, please step out for a heligram. And she stood out there, and her first thought was I was supposed to be picking her up for a dinner engagement, 5 minutes earlier. So she was, why is he in that helicopter instead of at the door? And then the noise sort of overwhelmed her, and I'm thinking, this is, I don't know, $125 a second. Let's make a decision, you know? And she finally kind of got it and stepped back and saw the Just Say Yes, and she said yes.
Well, this is a good point to end this segment, of course, with Michael Wolk. And maybe we'll talk to Henry and get her side of the story. Let's see if it really is that romantic. Thank you for being with us, and we enjoy your work around town, and keep up the good work. I'm sure if you're a regular watching Open to the Public, you've seen us at the Wolfsonian Museum. The man to my left is the person responsible for the Wolfsonian, Micky Wolfson. Literally, the Wolfson family is synonymous with South Florida. First television station, WTVJ, Channel 4, CBS back in the old days. Your mom and dad, wonderful contributors to this community. And you follow in their footsteps, the Wolfsonian, back in 1986. How did this come about?
Well, it came about because I had been collecting for about 35 years and been putting the collection in this building. It was a storage warehouse, the famous Washington storage. And finally one day, the owner came to me and he said, "Now, Mickey, I want to have a serious talk with you. Either you buy it or get out." And there was no question of getting out because there was nowhere to go to.
Was that Coleman Leonard, the owner back then?
No, Coleman Leonard worked with the owner.
Okay.
The owner was Mr. Mathis and the Mathis family, and they Matthews, and they had built the building in 1926 and kept it until I bought it.
So that's where you purchased the building, had all of the collecting that you've done for years and years and years. And I'm fascinated by the time period that you chose to collect from.
1885 to 1945. It was pretty arbitrary, 1885. That's when the United States and Britain became equal in the gross national product. And that's when the great rivalry between Germany and Britain surfaced for the imperial remains, the colonies. And then the Netherlands was equal in power, but they were an independent country and they didn't parade on the great stage of international events. They just went on making money and, and maintaining their colonies in the Indies. And at that point, 1885, that's also when Italy began her industrial revolution. She came very late to the Industrial Revolution. And those really are my 5 countries that we emphasize, though other countries are represented here in the collection.
Now, I look to our left and we have the Youth Audience Gallery. How did this come about? I mean, you know, and it's so important. The Wolfsonian is such a wonderful educational vehicle, and now you're catering a lot of pieces strictly to young adults.
Well, that's what we emphasize. This is more an educational resource than a museum, and it's young people who have to learn about how to use a museum, the definition of a museum, where it comes from, and why it's important to them. Because museum or school, it's the same thing. It's where people go to learn, or as man is defined by the National Geographic as a tool maker, this is where you come to learn to develop your tool making capacity and capabilities to extend your knowledge, to extend your technical competence. So really, these are this is our audience. In fact, it's not ironic that we write Young Audience Gallery, because these are the kids. They learn how to make use of this and how to identify what's in this museum, and they learn about life through schools and through museums such as this. So they're really the ones that will determine the success or not in the next 100 years of the museum.
Yet this museum and what this man has done is so terrific. The kids not only come here and learn, but they also, I think, down on the 2nd or 3rd floor, they actually draw.
So we have a big program with the Dade County School Board Museum Resources educational program, and the kids come, blind children come too, everybody, all kids come here, and they find something to stimulate them, and then they respond. They do books, or they do drawings, or they write letters. There's been a tremendous response, some through many different medias. There are the books downstairs, which you'll see that the kids put together. There are letters that we receive, there are drawings, there are all sorts of wonderful responses by these kids that show that they are getting something out of this museum. Now, it's not really a museum because we find that a word inappropriate for Miami. Museums are fine if it's the Metropolitan Museum or the British Museum, but this city really came too late to appropriate a 19th century word, museum. So we don't call it a museum, we call it the Wolfsonian, but we let the kids and the adults identify what it is and what they see and what they learn. We're non-judgmental, we just present the raw material and they shape it or do with it what they will.
Well, let's make Micky Wolfson judgmental. You have pieces in here that I know the 2 pieces behind us, the Frank Lloyd Wright's piece.
Well, you know, this is a wonderful gallery because it has some of the treasures of the collection. It has the great Green in Green bench from California. It has the Macintosh piece. You know, there's a great Macintosh exhibition traveling around the world now. It has this wonderful Dutch piece. It has some of the great pieces of decorative arts of this century, the Wolfers, Turkey, Belgium, the Frank Lloyd Wright sprites from the 1913, 1914 Midway.
And what, those were in a garden in Chicago?
They were in the Coney Island. It was called Midway Gardens. It was an amusement park with restaurant. It was destroyed by Prohibition because people didn't go to the gardens to drink anymore. And these were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and Iannelli, an Italian-American sculptor. He actually executed them. And it's very interesting. If you go to Mayfair in the Grove today and you look carefully at the details of Mayfair, you'll see how these sprites from 1913, 1914 by Frank Lloyd Wright influenced the architecture of the Mayfair, which is right here in Miami. And that's fun for kids and adults to realize that there's nothing new under the sun. It's a question of emphasis and evolution rather than evolution. So you can see the influence of these 1913 objects right here in Miami. And that's why you would come here to learn about our environment. And because what man makes man, and man made all this, and this has great influence on us because they're things we live with every day.
Well, I want to do this. Let me take a break. There's so much more I have to talk to Micky about. You have a tour coming up in Italy in September. I also want to talk about your folks and growing up here in South Florida and your fascination with trains. magazines. We'll be right back with Micky Wolfson right after these messages.
In more than 54 million homes, this is the place for news, business, and sports updates around the clock.
I'm Gordon Graham. A whole day's news every half hour. This is Headline News.
A complete newscast every 30 minutes, 48 times a day.
A jury in Tucson, Arizona has decided that
Headline News, fast-paced and always up to the minute.
No matter what time of it, hour or half hour you tune in, you're never more than 30 minutes away from getting a full update on anything and everything that's going on anywhere in the world.
Headline News, a distinct news service designed for viewers seeking news and information on demand.
Headline News is the answer for the people who want to know the news in a concise, accurate, up-to-minute format.
Anchored by a veteran team of seasoned journalists and backed by the worldwide resources of CNN.
Even in the best of times, Somalia was...
come to terms with the most fundamental freedoms of all.
In a country where symbolism seems to mean a lot, it may be the beginning of real change.
Headline News is the place viewers turn for the latest national and international news.
From WSB-TV, this is an Action News cable update. This is News Center 4, City Edition.
Headline News Local Edition from WYOU.
And Local Edition brings viewers news from their community by way of a unique partnership with broadcast stations and cable systems nationwide. From live business reports throughout the day.
Myron Cantel is following the markets, and he has more business news from New York.
To the sports ticker throughout the night and weekends. Headline News, a whole day's news every half hour.
We're back with Micky Wolfson. Growing up in South Florida, grew up on North Bay Road. Your mom was a wonderfully talented artist with the Japanese Oriental art.
She painted in the Chinese manner, and she had a great success. She had an exhibition in China and in Vietnam, and she had...
what, the cards, I remember?
No, yes, she had a contract with Hallmark, and for about 15 years, any Hallmark card which had a Chinese motif were hers, and she gave the money to scholarships at Miami-Dade for kids interested in the arts, and they go on. So she was very talented.
And your dad was this wonderful businessman. So many things. You remember Wometco Theaters for you old timers? Of course.
And WTVJ and
the Coca-Cola, the bottling company.
They didn't have, the bottling wasn't in Miami. Interesting, it was the 5th largest bottling company in the world, but they didn't have the Coca-Cola in Miami. Here they had, the television, WTV, but it was a public company traded on the market and New York Stock Exchange. And he was so proud of his contribution at Miami-Dade. That was his thing he, I think, was most attached to, and thus they named the downtown campus the Wolfson campus. But that was the thing which gave him the most satisfaction, because the whole family's been interested in education, and they tried to educate their children. I don't know if they did a good job or not, but they sure tried. I must give them credit for that.
But growing up under that diversity, your mom being on the artist side and your dad being the terrific businessman, how did that shape Micky Wolfson?
Well, Miami, was a very different place than it is today. It was a much more modest city, and so really we had to turn elsewhere for our education, mostly. And I went away to school at 12 years old, so I wouldn't say that Miami shaped me so much as my education elsewhere. And I always was fascinated by Miami, and it appealed to kids because it was such a wonderful place to grow up. But sadly, of course, in those days, we didn't have really a museum, and we didn't have access to some of the cultural resources that we have today. And people forget that. This was a small southern town on Biscayne Bay, and we had no Connecticut or Entro Terra. There was nowhere to go except the Bahamas or Cuba. And of course, most people went to Cuba because Havana was the great metropolis in those days, and that was our amusement. I mean, one went to Havana for the weekend, and or to more modestly, the Nassau, but that was more like a resort. But Havana was the bright lights in the great department store.
Do you have an exhibition coming up with Cuba somewhere in the near future?
We publish a journal called the Journal of Decorative and Propaganda Arts, and the last journal is dedicated to Cuba, the first republic. That's from the Spanish-American War until 1945, which is my cut-off date. But we have done quite a bit of solid scholarly work on the island and its decorative and applied arts of that period. And I think the journal is quite sensational since it comes from an American source. And I think it's been greatly appreciated both in this country and elsewhere. And even some of the copies, I'm pleased to say, have been smuggled into Cuba. And even Castro himself has read the journal and been impressed by the Yankee ingenuity to get this thing done.
Sadly, Mickey spends half of his time in Europe. Along the positive note, you're going to, in September, I believe, have a tour of Italy. Tell us a little bit about that.
If you like this, you should come and see it in situ. I run every year. I take a group of my benefactors and people who are interested on a trip to unknown or underground Italy. We focus mainly on the period 1885 to 1945, which is a curious Italy for most visitors and tourists because people go really for the antiquities. But this is, we don't skip all the antiquities. I mean, I give you all a glimpse into that world too. But our emphasis really is modern Italy from 1885 to 1945, which corresponds to the dates of this collection. And we usually start in Genoa, where we have a branch foundation, the Genovese Wolfsonian, and we have a great castle there, which is actually the largest object in the collection, and that will ultimately house the Italian collection, and that'll become Italy's first decorative and applied arts museum of any sort. So that's quite, we're quite proud of that too.
And if you people have not had the opportunity to come to the Wolfsonian, it's over on 10th and Washington. It's a wonderful educational experience. Get on down here. The man to my left, I hope you spend more time here in South Florida, because every time Micky Wolfson is in town, wonderful things happen in this city.
Steve,
and we miss you, and we need you here.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for being with us. Of course, Micky Wolfson, the man, the Wolfsonian, it's because of this man. Thank you, Mickey. The Wolfsonian has a wonderful youth exhibition that's going to be taking place May 1st. If you want, give them a call. You can find out about it. They'll have some terrific works here. And if you haven't been to the Wolfsonian, it's a terrific way to look at history. You don't have to be a kid to come here and enjoy some of the fabulous exhibitions that they have going on. Till next week, I'm Steve Cohen. We'll see you on Open to the Public.